in man or faith in science, but what is faith? How does faith help us during times of distress? People, perhaps instead of faith, people are talking about a kind of trust. Is faith something we should consciously think about on an everyday basis? I want to change that to in our everyday lives. Just a second.
Okay, don't forget, Michael, it's not a race. You can slow down a bit,
I was just practicing the words.
All righty, gotcha.
I can't spell under stress. Did you mean yes? All right. I think we got the signal, so I think we're on. Lots of people talk about faith. They may talk about faith in God or faith in man or faith in science. But what is faith? How does faith help us during times of distress? Perhaps instead of faith, people are talking about a kind of trust. Is faith something we should consciously think about in our everyday lives? Welcome to the 5th episode of Bereaved But Still Me. It's not me, it's the 54th episode. Welcome to the 54th episode of Bereaved But Still Me, the podcast formerly known as Heart to Heart with Michael, a program for the bereaved community. He coughed. Our purpose is to empower bereaved members of our community with resources, support, and advocacy information. Today's program, A Question of Faith, Grief in Jewish Thought. Here with us today to discuss this is our guest, Rabbi Daniel Liben. Rabbi Liben was ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary in 1983 and became the spiritual leader of Temple Israel of Natick, Massachusetts in 1991. He is a past president of the Massachusetts Board of Rabbis and of the New England Region Rabbinical Assembly. Dan has made the exploration of prayer as a spiritual practice a cornerstone of his rabbinic work. Dan has taught meditation to rabbis at the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. He also teaches Israeli folk dancing. I hit the mic. He also teaches Israeli folk dancing and likes running. Dan is married to Fran Robbins Lieben, and together they have five. Dan is married to Fran Robbins Lieben, and together they have 5 grown children and how many grandchildren?
9.
9. I thought so. We went up. Okay, hold on. Dan is married to Fran Robbins Lieben, and together they have 5 grown children and 9 grandchildren. But more importantly for our purposes tonight, Dan is my brother. Collectively, we are bereaved of our father and my daughter, his niece, Liel. Our loyal listeners may remember when Rabbi Liben was on our program in season 1, where we talked about Jewish observance of grief. So, Dan, thank you so much for coming back to the program.
Pleasure to be here, Mike.
First off, tell me, is there a good working definition of faith? Because I'm not sure everyone is working off the same concept.
Well, I'm not sure if there is one simple definition of faith, but I will put out there that in the Jewish tradition, we actually have 2 different words that we use when we talk about faith. One of them is emunah, and the other one is bitachon. Emunah is always translated as faith, and bitachon is translated as faith or as trust. And I think that's really important because it begins to point towards a certain direction of how we might think of faith. Bitachon, for me, is a sense that however things may work out, that I have the faith or the trust that I will be able to handle it, that I will be able to weather the storm. That's an important aspect of faith, I think.
Well, bitachon also means security. And so I would argue also that if you have that kind of trust, then you are secure in who you are, where you are, and where you're going, even if you don't always know where you're headed. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that's true. And the truth is we don't really ever know where we're headed. Things are unfolding and changing all of the time. But I think having a faith enables us to have that structure that you were talking about, an ability to deal with whatever unfolds as it is unfolding.
Well, let me go ahead with that. Is faith transactional? And by that I mean people will say sometimes, if you do this for me, I will stop smoking, or I will stop smoking if you will do something for me. Is faith transactional? Can you bargain with God in that way?
Well, I think we experience it that way. I think it's human nature to experience it that way, but I don't think it's the reality. And a good example may be to look in the Bible, in the Torah, in the book of Genesis. We see an example of Jacob, who offers two classic prayers to God when he is in a crisis situation. The first when he is very young at the beginning of his journey, and the second when he is some 20 years older and literally on the way back from that same journey to his home. And the contrast of those two prayers, I think, is instructive, because in the first prayer, we see Jacob, who's alone, running away from home, forced to run away because Esau, his brother, wants to kill him, and with good reason, because Jacob has been deceitful with him and stole the blessing from their father that rightly belonged to Esau. He's running away for his life, and he is away from home for the first time in his life, and he goes to sleep that night with nothing but a rock to put under his head as a pillow. And that's when he has that famous dream of the ladder with angels descending and ascending. And I'm not going to go into the ladder, into the importance of the ladder right now. That's not our direct interest. But what I want to point out is the prayer that he offers when he wakes up from this dream. His first reaction is, surely God was in this place and I didn't know, in a sense of awareness that the world is different than what he thought, that the world is larger than than he thought, and that he is connected to the universe, or to God, if we want to say God, in a way that he didn't know. But then comes the prayer, which kind of I think he kind of forgets that transcendence. And the prayer he offers is a transactional prayer, as you suggested. The prayer he offers is kind of, well, God, if you see me safely on my journey, and if you give me food, and if you give me clothing, and you bring me back again in safety, then you will be my God.
Wow.
And many of our commentators look at that and say, that's a very transactional prayer.
That there's another word for it that I can't use, but it puts himself in a position where he can tell God what to do almost, and there's I think a loss of who's in charge there. You know what I'm saying?
Well, at the very least, he's suggesting. He's, maybe not, he's suggesting that this is what God should do if he wants him to accept him as his God. It's a little bit chutzpahdik, or you could say that this is kind of classic. It's foxhole theology, when we really feel threatened and we're at our wits' end, and we leave all our more sophisticated theology and sense of presence behind. Then we fall into that. Please, God, if you do this for me, then I will believe in you. So that's the first prayer he offers. But then we see the second prayer that he offers some 20 years later, which is in the following week's Torah portion, where instead of that kind of a prayer, the prayer he offers begins with gratitude. He says, Katonti mikol hachasidim, I am small compared to all of the goodness that you've provided me. I left here with nothing but a staff in my hand, and I've come back with 2 huge camps and with wives and children and possessions, and I don't deserve this.
I have to break here for a second, because first of all, we need to put this in context. He's coming back, and Esau's waiting for him, and he doesn't know what's coming.
Right. He's coming back.
Thing.
So
he's scared.
He is scared once again, because the same Esau that he ran away from is now going to meet him as he comes back. And he's coming home to pay up, as it were, to pay the piper.
But I also want to point out, I also want to point out that as far as his first transactional prayer went, God came through.
That's true. That's true, but he doesn't know if God will still come through now that it really counts. Now that he's really coming back to face what he did 20 years ago, maybe this is payback time. Maybe this is it. And after beginning with gratitude, he then says, and I need your help. First comes the gratitude, and then after the I need your help is this interesting prayer. It's a very Jewish prayer. He says, and remember, you were faithful to my father and my grandfather, to Abraham and Isaac. You made promises to them. So for their sake, keep that promise with me. That's a very Jewish prayer. Our liturgy is filled with the sense that we're never on our own in our relationship with God, but that we're part of a people that has a historic relationship with a God who made promises to us, who made a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that we would be his people. So that's, to me, the interestingly, uniquely Jewish part of that prayer, although I suppose that any tradition could tell its own unique story about its relationship with God,
Sure,
informing that kind of a prayer.
I will get to that later, but I think that probably one of the things that's common to most monotheistic religions. But we'll get to that later. I don't want to go there now. Let me ask you: can faith function as a coping mechanism? What I mean is, when my daughter was dying, I sat there, but I didn't read texts and prayers to bring her back. I read texts and prayers because I was in a place where my faith told me that things tend to work out the way they should, even if I don't like it. And whereas the rest of my family was telling me, we're going to bring her back, we're going to pray, you'll see, we have faith. And at one point, somebody in my family accused me of not having faith. And I said, well, no, I have buckets of faith, except that my faith says things work out the way they should. And your faith is leaning towards magic. And I don't really know that that's going to help you. So how can faith work as a coping mechanism? And how can we help other people get to that coping when they're dealing with their own grief?
Well, there are a lot of things to unpack in what you just said, Mike. And the
Go
first
ahead.
thing I want to say is that I don't think I'm going to judge the quality of another person's faith.
Okay.
So if a person believes that through their prayers and through their intense relationship with God, God may choose to listen to her and to change the decree, as it were. Who am I to say that that's not possible? Who am I to say that that's not, that's not helping them in this moment? But it doesn't describe my faith, as I think it doesn't describe your faith. And that's where I agree with you. I think that, yes, faith, of course, is an important and necessary coping mechanism when we are in dire straits, when someone we love is on their deathbed, or any number of things might be befalling us in the world. But I suppose there are different ways that people understand that. For me, it's more in the sense that you described. Things will unfold the way they need to unfold, which isn't the same thing as saying the way they're supposed to unfold. A child isn't supposed to die, but things do unfold the way they have to unfold, in a way that we can't change their course. And faith, for me, as it is for you, I believe, a coping mechanism in that, first of all, it connects me. It grounds me.
Yeah.
It reminds me that I'm not alone in the universe.
Right.
I'm connected to the other people who are around me. I'm connected to a power that's much greater than me. I'm connected to God as a source of compassion who will hold me and see me through this, even if I'm going to be sorely disappointed in the outcome. So yeah, I think faith is a coping mechanism, a necessary one, even for people who may not think about the question of faith much until a crisis occurs. And then they might find that it might be the simplistic faith of Jacob in the first dream, the foxhole kind of faith. It may be a mature one that comes out of years of gradual growth and practice. But faith will be there for you in some way, in the way that you need it in that moment.
We're going to stop. That's part one. And I actually want to pick up from this point when we come back, but let's take the break here.